Hey, this is Nick Milvoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each week we are talking about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know. And this week, there is absolutely no disputing.
No doubt.
That you should know all about B.B. King.
That's right. B.B. King was my intro into the blues, really. And I was a blues kid. I wanted to, because ain't nothing, nobody knows more about the blues than a 14-year-old kid from Iowa.
You wanted to be the next Kenny Wayne Shepherd, or
I was right there. Johnny Lane, Kenny Wayne. They're one of, I'm the logical next step.
Though they're all Midwestern dudes too, right?
Johnny's from North Dakota, one of the Dakotas,
right.
North Dakota, and Kenny's from Shreveport, Louisiana, which is right in the smack dab middle of the Midwest.
Right. All right. I was thinking about Johnny.
Yes.
All right. Well, before we get to BB, we want to remind you that you can get at us, send us your messages, send us your thoughts, send us your requests. We get a lot of messages about guitar players we would love to put on this list, and a lot of them probably aren't going to make it on the list. Maybe that'll be on 100 Guitarists Part 2, 500 Guitarists.
Your Uncle Benny, who showed you Smoke on the Water, is not going to make the list. Sorry.
But we do love to hear from you, and I check out a lot of people send us. So get at us, 100 guitarists at premierguitar.com. You can text or leave us a voicemail at 319-423-9734. We will listen to your voicemail, and if it works for one of our episodes, you will hear your voice on one of our episodes.
There you go. All right, today's episode is brought to you by Gibson Guitars. And today, Nick, we're going to talk about the Rumble in the Jungle 1974 ES355 Walnut. Tell us about it.
That's right. That guitar was launched in September 24, and Gibson made only 100 of those guitars. And B.B. King's performance at the Zaire 74 Festival was a powerful moment in music history, bringing the soul of the blues to the stage, uniting a global audience, and setting the tone for one of the most iconic sporting events of all time, the Rumble in the Jungle. And so now Gibson is proud to honor that performance with that limited edition instrument, which is the instrument that BB used at the festival and favored up until he developed the Gibson Lucille model in 1980.
It's a faithfully created tribute to the Walnut 355 that he used on that concert. It features Murphy Lab light aging, mother of pearl inlays, T-type custom Bucker hip pickups, a mono baritone switch, and a Maestro Vibrola tailpiece. It also comes bundled with a host of case candy that ties back to that historic festival performance, as well as the fight itself. And you also get a special Zaire hardshell case. So you can head over to Gibson.com and check out that Rumble in the Jungle guitar. So I feel like just talking about the Rumble in the Jungle, it makes sense to kind of start. We're going to get to his tone. We're going to get to some albums. We even got a video here we're going to show about what I think is one of the most economical B.B. King solos I've ever heard. And it's great. And it's not even on a record.
And that's coming from a very economic player.
That's true. But first, let's talk about Lucille.
Yeah.
Because arguably Lucille is as famous as BB. I mean, when people see that guitar, to me, and I get the masses probably can't differentiate between a 335, a 355, or a 330, but that shape, to me, he's one of the most associated artists with that ES shape.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So there is a great book about Lucille and his guitar, written by Eric Dahl in Nashville. If you really want to get into the weeds about it, but spoiler, there's more than one Lucille. Right. He had different Lucilles throughout his career. And in 1980, B.B. King or Gibson launched the first Lucille model. And typically, when I think of a Lucille model, it's black ebony, rectangle inlays, and a baritone the 4-knob standard setup with a baritone switch, and usually some kind of fanciness on the headstock.
Yeah. Classy vibe.
Classy vibe, tuxedo even, because if you saw BB King on stage, he was likely in a tuxedo.
Yeah.
So, what's your view on the 335 style guitar, and how do you hear that? How do you feel about that guitar being so closely tied to BB?
That's a great question, because there is a 335 sound. I'm not a 335 player. I don't have one. I never have. It'd be cool to have one. When I think of that sound, or when I have played them, like, the sound that I have in mind is not BB King's sound. To me, BB King is BB King's sound, but like Larry Carlton, when he is playing his ES 335,
I'd put him number 2 on the list. Most closely identified guitarist with 335s. I'd put him number 2 on the list.
Or ESs in general, even.
Yeah.
Like, he's pretty. He is a go-to for me, and his sound doesn't sound anything like BB King.
No.
Right?
No.
He's
obviously influenced by him. I mean, I can hear BB's influence in Larry Carlton, but
sonically, it's a different thing. When I think about Grant Green, that doesn't sound like BB King. There's the ES body style doesn't have a sound, and just like a Les Paul doesn't have a sound, right? There's a center lane there, but it's so varied. And I would say that BB King is not near the center lane. He's off on his own tip. Can you conjure that sound? You could try. So that's sort of my thoughts on it.
I think of his sound as darker than I would think, but having this kind of top end bite to it. And I think that is done mostly by his attack.
Yeah.
And
his attack is special.
His attack is special. And I mean, they literally named a portion of the fretboard after you. If they do that.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like the BB King box.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
They literally named a portion of the fretboard after you, because you're so closely identified with the vocabulary that comes out of that area of the neck. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible. So when was the first time, when we talk about a sound, basically it's a 335 into an L5 series amp, solid state amp.
Yeah.
We're not talking fancy boutique tube things or, digital boxes. Obviously he seemed to me like a real guitar into amp fella.
Yeah, and I'm sure that comes from, I mean, all that early stuff too. You go back to his earliest records. He's using, like, who knows what he was using.
I think he was actually using a Telecaster on early records, the earliest ones.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, really? Yeah. I read that in his book.
So there's a part in the documentary Life of Riley. I forget who BB's talking about, but he's talking about another guitar player getting all this sound from, he says, an amp this big, and I'm imagining like a Champ or something, maybe it's Super or whatever, but he's like, man, talking about they got that much sound out of that. That's what I'm imagining on those early records. And so I think when you come up and you develop your sound and your language from that sort of situation, imagine playing a Tweed Champ or something. It's like, you don't really need a lot, because it's so in your fingers. It's so part of, like, we can develop our sound. Now you can develop your sound so many different ways. You could do that. You could just play guitar straight and amp and not need a lot. You could be a pedal person and really develop your sound that way and make your personal thing. But BB is, like, notably the person whose sound is, like, one of the most sounds associated to what is coming from what he's actually doing with his fingers. And I get really into watching videos of him playing and thinking about his attack. Like you were saying, there's a way that he hits the strings and varies the way he hits the strings that makes so much sound come out of it. And that is I find that so much harder to replicate than so many things. Fast riffs, stuff like that from other people that are like hard, tricky parts. I can sit and practice that, right? Maybe I'll get it that fast, maybe I won't, whatever. But like with BB, it's such a deeper, more like existential thing. It's like I'm not gonna ever make that sound like that. I'm not ever gonna get that attack. And then we get into the vibrato, and that's a whole other thing on how he gets his sound.
Yeah.
So it's like, it makes sense to me. It just totally makes sense that there's like not a lot of like gear fetishization there.
Was he a heavy string guy or a light string guy?
Well, notably, BB King played Billy Gibbons' guitar when he used to use heavy strings.
I
And
knew
said,
it. I knew it.
Billy, why you working so hard?
That's right.
That's the story. So I think the story is that BB was using 9s, right? And then Billy started using 8s. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've played Billy's guitar. It's, I don't want to say offensive, but it's definitely shocking to the system when you first pick up a guitar like set up like that with 7s or 8s or whatever. Or I don't know. And like you feel like you're King Kong driving a VW Bug. You know, you're just like, I can't. You pay more attention to. You can't just kind of go on autopilot with. You know, it takes a certain amount of energy to bend a whole step with your setup, and if you go to a setup like that, you could easily just pop a string. You know, that's interesting.
Now, here's an interesting thing. I wanted to fact check myself here about what I just said, because that was coming from a Billy Gibbons video. If you start looking around on the internet, what obviously BB would have used different string gauges over the course of his life, right? Different stuff was available. When he started playing guitar, they didn't make 8s.
Mm-hmm.
What I find most commonly answered here is that BB used 10s.
That seems like,
and that seems more
reasonable. I guess my
accurate.
point being, I think he was like in the bell curve of string gauges in that 9 to 10 area rather than Steve Ray Vaughan 12s or Billy Gibbons 7s. Like, I feel like he was more in the middle point when it comes to string gauges.
Now, I see other stuff that says the BB used 9s, and that at some point I'm sure he did. Like, there's a mix. It's not this flattened version of his history from that story of like, this is, but I think the whole point is like BB sound is so big. It's like BB sound is so big. I bet he's using 15s. You know, it's like I bet the strings are as big as the sound, and it's not that.
It's not, no.
Yeah, that's the real message.
And you know, the one thing you're not going to get from BB King's playing is a lot of chord vocabulary.
No, there's a great thing also in the Life of Riley movie where it's like, you know, I've heard this story again, like reading guitar magazines growing up, and anytime somebody talked about BB King, it was like, well, BB doesn't play chords. And I remember seeing stuff that's like, well, BB says he doesn't play chords, but I've seen him play some chords, right? Too. Like, exactly. And there's videos of him where he's like doing chord stabs and stuff, and like he plays some chords. But there's in that movie, Bono is talking about when they worked together, and the BB was like, gentlemen, I don't do chords. This is what I do.
He sings, he entertains, and he plays fills and solos.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not looking for BB King to learn new chords from BB King. That's not what BB King does.
Right.
You know, he is an entertainer. And entertainers don't just sit in the back and chump, 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 play Freddie Green chords. Sorry, Freddie. He is a upfront, emotive entertainer who had developed and invented such a unique vocabulary that laid the foundation for all of modern electric blues. There's basically, there really wasn't electric blues as much before BB King.
We should talk about that. Yeah. To me, that is so true that I almost have a hard time, and I think people will be able to relate to this, that like I almost have a hard time really like parsing out BB King from the blues. And what I mean is like his thing, his sound, his voice, his musical voice on the guitar, but also his singing voice. It's so tied to everything that came after him.
Yes.
That it can be hard to see how important it was.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the guys that came next, all the British guys, for example, like they take their favorite. They make their favorite choice of like, well, I like Albert King or I like Freddie King, you know, which King do they like? And who they take their cues from. And that's fine. That's I believe that to be true. Or Buddy Guy or whoever, any of the, you know, the iconic players. But more often than not, even as much as I can hear those things, more often than not, I hear BB King having like an outsized influence on that whole style of playing. Because I think it is the most like vocabulary wise, not sound wise, but vocabulary wise, it's sort of like the most distilled version.
Yeah. To me, he is the root of what we know as electric blues today.
Yeah.
You know, everybody after him, from you name it, Clapton, Beck, Kenny Wayne, Johnny Lang, everybody was influenced by BB King. And I don't think anybody would argue that. Like, he was almost like Bob Marley in reggae. Like,
yeah.
Everybody after Bob Marley who plays reggae guitar was influenced by him.
Yeah, it's this inescapable thing.
And
you could say, well, I'm into this, I'm into that. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about his vibrato.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got into BB King, just seemed to be always kind of ubiquitous in my mind. You know, because I was a big Clapton fan, and I'd read interviews with Clapton. He mentioned BB King. I'd go find some of my earliest kind of discoveries when it comes to blues guitar was Clapton and BB King. And what I noticed was that at one time, Clapton and BB King were probably my two favorite guitar players very early on.
You must have freaked out when Riding with the King came out.
Oh, dude. I was waiting for I was at the store at midnight or whatever. That was an album where I was there on release day.
Wow.
I was awesome. At Best Buy. I was wherever I went. I was there on release day. But what I noticed about them too is that they have very different vibratos.
Mm-hmm.
And one's a bit slower and BB's is faster. And
BB's is fast.
BB's is a fast vibrato. And it's faster than the human voice, really. Because I feel like if a human voice had that kind of speed of vibrato, it almost sounded like almost not yodely, but it creeped that way. And it took me forever to figure out as I was developing my vibrato. And thankfully I grew up in a time where I didn't have YouTube, but I could find videos of Clapton and BB playing.
Yeah.
And sometimes together even. And I would notice how BB's vibrato, he anchors his hand, the this part of the hand on it, and almost like you're turning a doorknob.
Yeah.
When he does it, right? Where Clapton lets his hand completely free of the guitar and moves it up and down. Yeah. And his hand shakes up and down, right? And it took me a while to understand the differences, but to me, what helped me the most when I was developing my vibrato is because I knew what the vibratos sounded like, and I knew what they looked like. I didn't know what they felt like. So what I would do is I would practice in a mirror until I can mimic what those vibratos looked and sounded like. Whoa. And then I was like, oh, that must be what they felt like. You know what I mean? But even though my vibrato now probably doesn't sound a lot like BB King's, it was pretty essential for me to try and emulate that to find what I needed to find.
Yeah, interesting, man.
Nowadays, my vibrato is much closer to Clapton's, but I would not have gotten there if I didn't try to emulate BB King's.
Like I've been thinking about listening to BB's vibrato and thinking about how like uniquely tense he can make a note sound. And it's like when you actually look at how much the string is moving, if you look up close when he's doing his thing, it's not moving very much. It's like
No, and it
it's not
leans
just
toward
that
the
it's
sharper
fast, it's-
side. It leans
yeah,
toward the sharper side of things. Yeah.
yeah. It's like less bent. It's just like this fast thing. It is
A
very cool.
bumblebee or
Yeah.
bee sting, right? Then they call it like a bee sting or a bumblebee type vibrato. I remember somebody describing it like that.
Yeah, makes sense.
You got it. All right. So let's talk. I'm going to skip ahead. You mentioned Bono. I'm going to skip ahead on our
Mhm.
list here. We're gonna come back and talk about the live albums because I think the
Uh-huh.
live albums are incredible. When Love Comes to Town, we need to spend a minute talking about this because are you a U2 fan? Would
Yeah.
you call yourself a U2 fan? Me
I would
too.
call myself a U2 fan.
I would. I'm in no way a
I cited
diehard
on
fan.
the last guitar record that I made, I cited The Edge as a major influence on my instrumental guitar music. So,
But sonically, not
sonically, yeah.
technique wise.
I mean, no, sonically, yeah.
Because with Edge, it's like with the delays and with his effects, that's a part of his whole vibe, right? You take
Yeah.
the effects out of Edge, he probably won't sound as much like Edge. Fair to say?
No, absolutely, totally fair to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we've heard you can find recordings of Edge without effects.
Yeah,
and
he doesn't sound like Edge, right? Yeah. Which good for him. But it was so interesting to me when I don't know, would this come out 86 probably? I mean, well before I started playing guitar, When Love Comes to Town came out, that I could not think of a band less prepared to back a blues artist than U2.
80 is from 1988. It's from Rattle and Hum.
88. Rattle and Hum, great. U2 are many, many things. They are an incredible all-time legendary band, incredible songwriters. Each person in that band has their own voice that they have used to great effect to create anthemic and important music in our world today. A blues band, they are not.
No, they are not a blues band.
If I was hosting a blues jam and U2 walked in,
you're not inviting them on stage?
It would have to be suggested to me. I wouldn't be like, yo, no, right? Though that band is not, and I don't want to say, I plug your ears, that band's not a jam band. And I mean that in the sense, not in the modern Fish way, but I mean, like, I don't see them and the songs they make. I don't see them getting in a room and jamming to write songs. I don't think that's what they do. And I think that's totally fine. And to have them back up BB King on a blues tune, BB saves that whole thing. BB's the MVP of that. I mean,
there's stuff in Daniel Lanois's autobiography that talks about working on songs with U2, and I think they do like jam to do some writing here and there, but I don't think it's what you're talking about, right? I don't think it's the type of jamming you're talking. They vibe on some chords over a beat, but we have very different takes on that song. I actually really like this song.
I do like the song. I like the song. But what I'm saying is, so U2 wrote the song.
Yeah.
Right? Which shocks me, frankly. Because when I first heard it, I would not have said, oh, that's a U2 song. Good on them. Good on U2.
They're talented, multifaceted cats.
But they're not known for writing blues tunes.
This style of music.
This style of music. You're right.
That's something that I love about it. That they like Eric Clapton making a record with BB King. You think about that and you're like, well, duh, Eric Clapton. Okay, but at one point, Eric Clapton wasn't Eric Clapton. I mean, he was for a long time, but like, yeah, it's still like getting up with BB King. Okay, that makes sense. At some point, these young guitar players we're talking about, name any of them, when they jammed with BB or whatever, it was like, what are they doing getting together with this guy? Like, what business do they have? And you could say that about U2, but like, U2 were not a blues band, but they were so big, and their craft was songwriting and pop craft. Like, it does seem very bold that they'd be like, let's get BB King to do this song with us.
And in
I
'88,
get it. I totally get it.
I don't think in '88 like BB was on a commercial high.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
I think his commercials.
I think this got him on modern rock radio, which is crazy. I mean, think about that. Like, to me, it's so cool and it's so interesting. And it's also like, it actually just makes sense because U2 they're not going. So, okay, what I was trying to say is, like, I'm getting a little off point here. What I'm trying to say is, like, any guitar player who we think is like fairly obvious, Eric Clapton playing with BB, you're okay because Eric Clapton does the blues, and okay, fine. He still hasn't been doing it nearly as long as BB because BB is so much older than him. U2 didn't do that. U2 did their thing, right? They wrote a song that's it's a blues form.
They wrote a song,
but they sound like U2, and
they wrote that for BB, right?
They wrote it for BB,
yeah.
But it's like, I think that they are doing their thing. They're staying more in their own wheelhouse that they had developed at that point and became like true, stadium superstars.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's not like, oh my gosh, how were they so audacious that they would have BB King play a blues song with them? It's like, no, they just wrote a song that's 12 bars long that uses those chords that sounds like them, and they were very confident and very comfortable in that space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
so
then fit BB in, and I think that's what works so well about it, is hearing those two sounds together.
I'm going to give you some fun facts about this tune. I guarantee you're not going to know how it ends.
Okay.
It was recorded at Sun Studio in Memphis. So from the jump,
Memphis, I think that's in Rattle and Hum.
Yeah. Oh, right? Yeah, that they're recording.
I forget. I haven't seen that in so long.
I haven't seen Rattle and Hum.
There's stuff in there. There's footage in there that's on either on a stage at a concert or it's like on a sound stage, but they're like performing on a big stage. But I can't remember if that's in there. Anyway.
So dig this. U2 played it for the last time, August 28th, 1993.
Okay.
Right. BB continued to play it at his shows. Obviously, it probably fit better, right? After BB died in May of 2015, U2 paid tribute to him by playing in Vancouver the following night by playing When Love Comes to Town for the first time in 23 years.
Okay.
I'm telling you, you're not going to know how this ends. The song was played 3 more times on the tour. The song was played at a promotional appearance at the Apollo Theater in New York during the Experience and Innocence tour. The song was played with the Sun Ra Orchestra.
I did know that they played with U2. I didn't know that they played this song together.
Is that available? I got to find that.
We're going to have to find out.
And they did play it during their, they played it once during the Sphere residency they had. So
what year was it that they played it with the orchestra?
2015. 2015-ish, I guess. Okay. It was after BB died. Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, When Love Comes to Town. Now, let's move on to BB's recorded output. Mm-hmm. As we both know, and you can tell from even a cursory glance at any of your favorite streaming services, BB has a lot of records.
Man, there really are a lot of BB King records.
What I've noticed about this, and I kind of touched on this before in the Lukather episodes, that sometimes some of these legacy artists who have been around a long, long time, who have gone from label to label to label, their output sometimes gets repackaged in compilations. It gets up on streaming. It's down on streaming. You're trying to find a certain song. Like we were just talking before we started recording about that one Lucille album.
Mm-hmm.
And from what we can tell, it's not on at least Apple Music. I haven't looked at Spotify or anything. But especially the old stuff tends to be repackaged and thrown around, and it's hard. It's hard. Look at this one classic Masters BB King album. Picture him with a Telecaster right there on the front. That is hard to keep track of all that. So, but however, what I think is consistent, strangely enough, are the live records he's put out. And easily the two ones that always come to the top of the pile are Live at Cook County Jail and Live at the Regal.
Yeah, for both such excellent albums.
All-time cover art for both of them.
Totally.
I mean, the blue Cook County Jail in like the prison uniform font.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Right? The BB King.
Some great crowd work on that record too.
Oh, dude. I know. Just if you want to know about banter during a show, and you got to remember, Cook County, he's talking to inmates.
Yeah.
And he's getting them up. Live at San Quentin's a good one too.
There's stuff on there. There's stuff on Cook County where he's like, all right, all you ladies.
I've never heard a bad live record recorded in a prison. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, well,
you want a good live record? Find a prison, like Live at San Quentin, like Johnny Cash. They all know they're an appreciative bunch. Attentive audience. So, yeah, Live at Cook County, Sweet 16. That to me is one of his all-time tracks, and to me, these records, and they sound good too. Like sometimes I have a harder time with older live records because the fidelity, because we're spoiled young millennials, Nick, that have a hard time listening to records or whatever that aren't at least listenable fidelity. But both of these records sound really good.
Both of these albums sound really good. Yeah, I agree. They're great sounding records. They sound warm and full and so much energy. Like it's like that you just hear so much interplay. In a bigger production, a more modern production, it doesn't get captured so well. These albums for me, they're my favorite BB King records. And I think that the thing is, I was thinking about this, like, why don't I know the studio albums as well? It's like I've listened to a lot of them. A lot of stuff doesn't connect in the same way. And it's like, because BB King isn't a studio artist. And, he talked about like some years he wanted to be on the road 365 days. But he through very late in life was playing like 300 shows a year. Like I think in his last years it was 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and he didn't like those 3 weeks. He didn't like being off. But you think about that, that's half the year.
Did you ever see him live?
I never saw him live.
Never saw him. I saw him the first time I saw him, he came to town. This is in Davenport, Iowa, to Adler Theater. My parents got me a ticket. I went by myself. They just dropped me off.
Oh, wow.
This had to have been 97, 98, somewhere in there. And he was still standing through the whole show. He sat down for the encore. That's, and I couldn't tell you, I'm sure he probably played all the hits, 3 O'Clock Blues, Sweet 16, Thrills Gone. Like, he seemed to have a cadre of tunes from his various early recording days that stuck in his set list his entire life. Obviously he played the hits, but when I saw him there, and then I saw him at Crossroads Festival, and I saw him here in Cedar Rapids one other time too. And it was all great. By the time after that first time I saw him, he was more into storyteller mode. He'd go and he would be telling stories a lot of the time while the band's vamping behind him or whatever. But his sound was always there. And since his style wasn't so physically demanding, I think it gave him a lot of longevity. You never got the sense that he was losing it. Because
that makes a lot of sense.
If he felt maybe internally that maybe he couldn't do some things he could do before, he probably subconsciously made up for it somewhere else, singing or entertaining or banter or something. You know what I mean? Like, the show was going to be the show, and whatever he had to do to make sure all the boxes were checked. Yeah. Cracking jokes, this or that, having them vamp while he played a little solo, or as we talked about before, having like people like Derek Trucks and John Mayer sit in.
Yeah.
You talk about an all-time. That's an all-time gig. That one with Derek and John Mayer was an all-time gig. And that's why I think his live albums are so have just stood up to the test of time longer than his studio records. Because that was his thing. His thing was live. The records,
and there are great studio recordings.
They're Completely Well, I think, is the best one.
Completely Well, and
Completely
the one before
Well.
that, what is it? It's not Half Well. What is it?
Live and Well.
Right, and
'Cause
that's
it's live.
That's half studio, half live.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're great. They're great records. I mean, Singing the Blues, 1956. That early stuff, man, that stuff is so great.
Yeah.
I love that too, and all those early records.
And then I think in the 90s, when he would do those records with a bunch of guests. So the first one I came across was Deuces Wild in 97.
Mm-hmm.
Clapton, Van Morrison, Bonnie Raitt, Jules Holland, Stones, David Gilmour, Willie Nelson. That to me was the best, as we talked about with Santana. It's the best version of doing this type of record.
Yeah.
And not every, and even the one before Deuces Wild, Lucille and Friends, which is the one we can't find.
Mm-hmm.
You have U2 When Love Comes to Town, Robert Cray, Vernon Reid. I really want to hear that Vernon Reid track. All You Ever Give Me Is the Blues. Gary Moore, Joe Walsh, Stevie Nicks, Mick Fleetwood, Branford Marsalis plays on it. Because he's such a revered musician across all genres, that I think that's what really makes it. Another album around this time is that Ray Charles record, Genius Loves Company.
Yeah.
That's another great example of how to take a legendary artist and bring in a bunch of guests to make an album.
But yeah, I mean, that stuff is cool. To me, that stuff feels like curiosities. Like, it's cool to listen to. I like listening to it. But it's still those live records. That's where he's at home. His home is on the stage,
Right.
More than artists that are playing 200 nights a year. Was like, well, BB's playing 50% more on stage. Like, it's really where things open up. You mentioned the Crossroads Festival.
Yes.
And I wanted to mention something about that. Obviously, you were there. I was not there. But there's this video, and it's Thrill Is Gone, and it's BB sitting up there with Eric Clapton, Robert Cray,
Jimmy Vaughn,
and Jimmy Vaughn, right?
They did a version of that at every Crossroads.
Okay.
At the one, I was at the 2010 one in Chicago, and I'm trying to remember if. Oh, it was BB King, Robert Cray, Jimmy Vaughn, and Clapton was the version of that I saw.
Is that sounds like that's the video that I would have seen.
So it was Robert Cray's band, and then Robert, BB, Jimmy, and Eric were sitting on chairs across the front of the stage, and they jammed on Thrill Is Gone or Rock Me Baby or something like that. And I kind of share the same sentiment as you, is that Robert, Jimmy, Eric, Strat players, BB King, humbucker player.
Yeah.
And his tone was just as wide as that stadium. You know what I mean? It didn't have the bite, but that's not his voice. His voice isn't having the Robert Cray or Jimmy Vaughn or Albert Collins snap.
Yeah.
To
but
it,
in a sea of Strat players,
it's standing
you also
out.
don't need that.
No.
That video is like, and I love Strats. I play a Strat much more than I don't play an ES guitar. No shade on the Strat. And there are lots of Strat tones that are big and huge. David Gilmour has the biggest tone there is, But Blues Jam, BB's this big, he's just like his sound is impossibly large. And these guys have this like percussive, thin Strat tone next to him. It's like, yeah, what? it doesn't matter. Like, what, you don't stand, there's no comparison. It just,
No.
it sounds to me, it's almost ridiculous in that setting to hear those guys. All great. They're all great. And they sound good. They're playing cool solos. They're playing cool stuff. But BB's sound is just like, there's no competition is not the right word, because it's not a competition. But there's no compatibility between the sounds.
No,
Like it doesn't make sense.
And I'm just looking at the lineup at festival. Heavy.
Yeah, who's there?
Sonny Landreth, Robert Randolph, Joe Bonamassa, Robert Craig, Jimmy Vaughn, Hubert Sumlin, Keb Mo, ZZ Top, Doyle Bramhall, Gary Clark Jr., Cheryl Crow, Derek Truck, Susan, Vince Gill, Albert Lee, James Burton, Keb Mo, Earl Clue, John Mayer, Buddy Guy, Ronnie Wood, David Hidalgo and Cesar Roses, Johnny Winter, Jeff Beck, Steve Winwood, and Clapton.
That is ridiculous.
Like, whew.
Wow.
Heesh. Whoosh. So, all right. Well, to wrap this up,
you got something you want to show me?
I do. I found this video online, and we're going to share it here. And to me, it's from a BB King instructional video. I remember hearing about this when I was a kid. I never saw the whole thing, but I found this little clip of him, and the guy interviewing him is just playing rhythm guitar. It's just them two, and they're playing a little 8-bar. They're playing a little 8-bar, much like, I would say, probably a similar progression to Key to the Highway or something like that. You'll hear it when it comes through. But just listen to what, I guess my point is, this isn't a straight 12-bar blues, one. Mm-hmm. So there are some changes, right? You can't just autopilot A minor pentatonic to this whole thing. But listen to how he is outlining the changes, how well he outlines the changes in just this little 8-bar thing that he plays here. Check this out.
8-bar thing. I feel like I'm talking to the person.
That vibrato, man. And notice his third finger vibrato, how different that looks.
I feel like I'm talking to the person.
It sure sounds like it.
Yep. First finger bends. I believe we're in A flat here.
Yeah, he's hitting every chord.
The bridge.
There's a bridge to this? Let's go. And notice how much muting he's doing with his right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So he might not know chords, but he knows how to voice lead a solo through changes.
Couple double stops there.
Yeah,
at the end,
I mean,
he's hitting.
Incredible.
That
amazing. To me is one of the. It's so economical, and it's such a harmonically. That's probably on his spectrum of what types of progressions he's played over in his life. That's probably on the more advanced harmonically.
Yeah. And man, just listening to that, I'm thinking like, he's so patient. And there's so much space, and it's like as much as I can know that, but like really like listening and experiencing it and thinking about it, it's so much harder to play that way than to play a lot of notes.
Oh,
and
so much harder.
I'm speaking for as a critic of other people's playing in this situation. Like anybody who comes after him, that's not how they play. Nobody plays like that.
Mm-mm.
And I'm not saying I can do it. I can't do that. Like, as far as even just I'm not talking about sound or anything like that. Just the space. Like, if I put myself into, I'm going to play as few notes as possible. I want to really get inside and play economically. I'm still going to play more notes than that. Cause it's this thing like that's, he possesses his thing so strongly. And we've talked about this in other episodes. I didn't bring it up before, but I think it's so aligned with his singing. His guitar playing is so aligned with his singing. And there's a whole other episode right there about BB singing.
Yeah.
His singing is amazing. And I don't actually know what I like more. I might like his singing. Like, I might think about his singing more than I think about his guitar playing, because his singing is so special to me, and the way his voice sounds, and that's so ingrained. And like, I can imagine his singing easier than his guitar playing, because his guitar playing, like, I can't do that, and I can't come up with that sort of melodic idea when I think, what's BB King sound like? It's like, it's so simple and so pure. It's unbelievable, man.
Exactly.
What a force.
Exactly.
That's great. I'm gonna watch that again.
I know. I want to watch the whole thing to hear him talk about that. And what the interviewer was asking about was, does he phrase differently on slower grooves than faster grooves? You know, I was like, well, you showed it.
Yeah,
you showed it.
Well, I think we covered BB King. If we could either spend the next 5 years talking about BB King records every week and have a BB King podcast, or we could stop right here.
Yeah,
and call it. And I think we call it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, that can only mean one thing.
That's right.
Here we are, the return of our current listening segment. What we've been listening to, what we're digging on in guitar music.
That's right. You want me to go first?
I'll go first. I have been really enjoying an album called Remembering Repeating by guitarist Brian John McBrearty. He's a Philadelphia-based guitar player. He made this record that I have referred to as meditation jazz. It's, we're talking about BB King. This is a great transition, talking about the sparseness of that last solo there. This is a very minimal sounding record. There's lots of drones. I don't have the instrumentation here. I imagine there's some harmonium and some synth drones, and then some really sparse jazz vibes over top of it. And Brian is just such a creative dude whose records I've really loved. I love other records of his. He's a fantastic guitar player. And this album I've been happy to see is getting a lot of attention. It just came out, I think 2 weeks ago, sometime this month. And I would recommend this one to anybody who's interested in it's a really great combination of things that, the term spiritual jazz gets thrown around a lot. I don't really love that term in all cases, but I do think terms serve a purpose. I think this is not that. This is this other thing. I've listened to it softly in the background while I'm working, and I've listened to this pretty loud, and it's a really peaceful album that can really fill space up. And I think it fills that zone between that kind of spiritual jazz kind of thing and ambient music and stuff I love, like Daniel Lanois and stuff like that. So Brian John McBrearty, Remembering Repeating. That's been my record this week. All
right. Mine, I guess you'd call it a record. It's available. It's 3 songs. Maybe we'll call it an EP.
Okay. Yeah.
One of our favorite guitar players, and I'm speaking for you, Julian Lage, came out with a thing called Apple Music Nashville Sessions.
I have not heard
3 songs. Yeah. It just came out. But specifically the track Northern Shuffle, which is a blues, basically.
Topical.
And I heard him play this when I saw his trio last fall. I want to say it was their encore. And to hear somebody as advanced harmonically as Julian is, and is so based in the blues as Julian is, because he really, really is. He grew up a blues kid just like me, although we took slightly different paths. I'm just saying. Just to hear him explore blues like that is so good. and how he finds different ways to phrase and different ways to stay out of the way of blues cliches is highly recommended. So check out Julian's Apple Music session, specifically the Northern Shuffle track. The other tracks are Omission and Woodside Waltz, which I'm sure are great, but I've only been listening to Northern Shuffle on repeat.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to check that out for sure.
There we go.
I'm a big Julian fan, so.
All right. So get at us. Next time, maybe you could be on the show. 100guitarists at premierguitar.com. Call us, text us, 319-423-9734. That goes directly to Nick in the heart of Philadelphia. And it'll wake him up at any time of the night. It's all
just wake me up.
Fair
That's
game.
fine.
It's fair game.
That's fine. And thank you again to Gibson for sponsoring this episode. Be sure to check out the Gibson Custom BB King Rumble in the Jungle 1974 ES 355 Walnut.
That's right.
One of 100.
One of
Get
100.
on it.
All right. So we'll see everybody next week.
See you then.